Our invocation this evening was given by the Reverend Rachel Gilmore, pastor of the gathering at Scott Memorial United Methodist Church, after which we'll all remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks for the gift of this day. We ask for wisdom, courage, patience, and sanity to make the decisions that we need to this day. Decisions that bring peace, dignity, and justice to both the haves and the have-nots in this great city. And Lord, in the words of Peter Marshall, the great Senate chaplain, when we are wrong, make us willing to change. And when we are right, make us easy to live with. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I like that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Gilmore. Madam Clerk, you have the roll call.
Yes, sir. All present except Miss Abbott, who is on vacation.
May I have a motion to certify the closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Motion open, votes open. May I have a motion to approve the informal and formal session minutes of June the 19th, 2018?
So moved.
Second.
Any additions or corrections? If not, the vote's open.
Ms. Kane, may I have your vote?
I abstained because I wasn't here, but
Okay.
didn't push, sorry.
By a vote of 8-0, you've approved the minutes as submitted with Ms. Kane abstaining.
Right. I will now go to the consent agenda. Vice Mayor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I move for approval on the consent agenda the following items. Items H1, resolution to direct the city manager to consider revisions to the city's flexible workplace policy. Item H2, ordinance to amend City Code Section 5-303 and add Section 5-312 regarding pet shops and licensing. Item H3, ordinance to add City Code Section 21-223 regarding authorized schools to install and operate a video monitoring system to record violations of drivers passing a stopped school bus. Item H5, ordinance to appropriate $622,543 to the clerk of the Circuit Court FY 2018-19 operating budget regarding technology-related expenses. So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. The vote is open.
Just one,
Yes.
I know Rosemary's got a different comment, but you're going to say about the pet.
Do we need to say about the pet?
I just want to make sure it gets covered.
Sure. So, and we wanted to say effectively that.
Yeah, what we want to do is, we want to make sure that if we make this change, we give additional duties and responsibilities to the animal control officers. We just want to make sure that HR does an assessment, so that we're making sure that if they're due additional compensation, that the manager would come back with the appropriate adjustments, so we wouldn't be asking people to take on additional responsibilities if they weren't properly compensated.
Got it.
So by a vote of 9-0, you've approved the consent agenda as read.
Yes, I wanted to.
Mrs. Wilson.
Yes, I wanted to say something about the request for having the city manager to do a study on our flexible work schedule for our employees. We haven't looked at it in 25 years, and we've had a few things change in 25 years about how people can get their work done, And in this age, especially with the unemployment rate being so low, we want to make sure that we can still attract the best and the brightest employees. And by doing this, we have the potential to include increased employee morale, reduced employee turnover, reduced absenteeism and tardiness, the improved ability to recruit outstanding employees, extending hours of customer service, and fostering an image of the city as an employer of choice with family-friendly, flexible work schedules that enable employees to achieve a healthy and productive work-life balance. And of course, you have to work it out with your supervisor that it's going to actually work for you. And it's not going to work for everyone, but I think there might be a lot of cases that we can really help our employees with this. And my son-in-law, who works for the federal government, he has a work schedule, and he works a longer day, but every 10th workday he gets off. So that's just one example of things that you could do. And I know our city attorney, Rod Ingram, he doesn't do real well early in the morning, he told me. So he likes to come in a little bit later, but work a little bit later. And he's found he's much more productive that way. So thank you, council, for supporting this.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. We'll now go to, under ordinances and resolutions, item 4, which is ordinances to approve a term sheet, Ray Asheville Park drainage improvements, authorize the city manager to execute a cost participation agreement and an agreement of sale and dedication, and direct staff to return a proper modification request in August, deferred from June 19th, 2008. And is Mr. Leahy going to make a presentation?
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Manager?
Yes, sir, he's available, and we'll bring it up on the screen.
Good evening, Mayor Jones, members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the cost participation agreement for Asheville Park Phase 1. So the agreement between the city, this is an agreement between the city and the developer of Asheville Park to construct the Phase 1 Asheville Park stormwater improvements. We brought this item to you on June 19th. You deferred it with some instructions to the staff to go back and investigate some options. We have done that. On your agenda tonight is an item that has 3 cost participation agreement proposals numbered 1, 2, and 3. There is also on your agenda tonight a planning item related to Asheville Park. That item happens to be consistent with Proposal 1, but it is inconsistent with Proposals 2 and 3, and there is a requirement that these items be consistent if they're going to go forward. All 3 of the proposed CPA ordinances in front of you approve a term sheet. They authorize the city manager to execute a CPA with the developer, and they direct the staff to make the appropriate public postings so that council may act on a proffer modification request in August. The cost proposal, the cost participation proposal has been the subject of a number of transmittals to council in your Friday packets. It has been a number of briefings to council in the informal sessions, so I'm not going to try to go through all of those again. I will say that based on the informal sessions discussions that we just had, there has been, all the focus is on the cost proposal number 1 and the cost proposal agreement number 3. With 2 notable exceptions, they are very, very much the same. Both of them assume that there will be a request granted that the number of maximum buildable lots in Village C will increase to 116 from 98. Both of them assume that council will grant some modifications to the current lot restrictions. Both of them assume that the city will own one of the new storage ponds in fee simple, which will let us net about $2.1 million in water quality credits that can be used in other projects in the city watershed, requiring that we own this in fee simple. And by fee simple, I mean that we actually own it as opposed to have an easement on top of it, allows us under the rules of the state of Virginia to net these water quality credits. Both of them would involve almost the identical construction schedule. The developer would be able to start their construction next spring, and they would complete that in the summer following next spring, in the summer of 2020. The biggest differences are that in proposal number 1, the developer would cost share in the cost of Phase 1. The developer would have participated to the tune of $3.1 million out of an $11.1 million project. The city, in turn, would have purchased the underlying property from the storage pond 10A for $400,000, making the developer's net contribution to the project, about $2.7 million. Proposal 1 also would have increased the number of maximum buildable lots in Asheville by 5 from 494 to 499. The major differences in Proposal 3 from Proposal 1 is that the developer would not cost share in Phase 1. The city would pay 100% of the $11.1 million cost, but the developer would forego all development in Village D, which would be a net reduction of 41 lots from the current situation, or 44 lots from the request that is currently pending in front of council. In doing that, it would reduce the number of buildable lots in Asheville Park from 494 or 499, depending on which case you're looking at, to 455 lots. So earlier in our informal session, Mayor Jones indicated that made a suggested modification that instead of the city just accepting a dedication of the Village D as open space, we would also have that dedicated to the city so that we would own the property for Village D, the underlying property, in fee simple. If that were to happen, that introduces options that we haven't been able to consider previously. One of the problems in Asheville Park is it just doesn't have enough storage. Phase 1, when we combine the ability to develop a larger lake on Village D with the existing Phase 1 proposal, we can develop up to 250 acre-feet of storage. Currently, Asheville Park has 90 acre-feet of storage. So we are increasing that storage by not quite 3 times the storage that's there. That would allow us to contain all the runoff expected from a 100-year storm. So that is that would be a tremendous ability to manage floodwaters within Asheville. Would have great benefits downstream, as we would a lot of that water would not pass downstream during the peak phase of the storm. It will result in some reductions in the Phase 1 cost, because the canal and culvert that currently is proposed to connect the Storage Pond 10 and the new Storage Pond 10A would be much shorter and simplified. It would provide some synergistic benefits when this lake was constructed. Not only would we have the more storage that we need, but the borrow material from from constructing that lake could be used for roadway projects in the southern watershed. And of course, we would also net additional water quality credits. So all of that would combine to offset the cost of the pond construction. Proposal 3, or the 3 with the modified, does have some immediate benefits in that it reduces the runoff and water quality impacts from Village D construction, which is about 8 to 9% of the total project, total Asheville project. It does have a downside. It foregoes $2.7 million in contributions from the developer to the project, and we certainly would have liked to have had that $2.7 million. That's an immediate benefit. The benefits of 3, particularly as modified by Mayor Jones, have some significant long-term benefits, quite a few, as I've indicated. The last issue I'd like to talk about is Asheville Park Phase 1 funding. In FY19, the Asheville Park CIP has enough funding for us to enter into the cost participation proposal with the developer under Proposal 1, but it does not have enough funding to enter into it for 2 or 3. That is not a shortage of money, but it's more of a timing of the way the money is appropriated among FY19 and FY20 in the CIP. So if you were to select Proposal 2 or 3 or the modified 3, the recommended solution would be to adjust the timing of funds among projects in the stormwater CIP. I can assure you that no other project will be impacted in any way if we do this. So if you were to select Proposal 2 or 3 modified, we would place an agenda item in August in front of you to make that transfer. At that point, I hope I've covered the points that you were hoping I'd cover. If not, I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Do we have speakers?
Yes, sir. The first speaker is C.J. Pedler. And after Mr. Pedler will be Matt Tonelson.
Thank you. Good evening. My name's CJ Fedler. I'm a resident of Asheville Park. My family and I moved to Virginia Beach and Asheville Park about 2.5 years ago. And the first year we were here, over a matter of 2-3 weeks, our neighborhood flooded twice. The second time there was water that was less than an inch from getting in our house. And, looking at the streets, knowing that there was no way out was honestly just a terrifying experience. I've talked to many neighbors since, and in knowing that some of them have had to get second jobs, bring in more money to offset the cost of their homes flooding and the damage for that is honestly heartbreaking. I consider myself, after talking to them, lucky because I only lost a car in all of that. After Tom's presentation, there's two viable options here. Option 1, option 3. One of them brings fiscal, benefits with it, given the $3 million. One of them brings, land options and, stormwater runoff options. Both of them really would help us. We really need to move this forward. We feel, honestly, we cannot delay this any longer. And getting an option for us really just helps with our security, our well-being, and just giving us peace of mind. I honestly consider myself incredibly lucky. I've moved into a neighborhood with a fantastic community, great people that just care about not only the community but everyone around them. For those of you that have been here the last few months, I'm sure you can see, by the outpouring that we've had last week, this week, the number of people that just continue to show up, it has just been amazing. We love Asheville Park. We love where we live. We love the area. We love the people that surround us. And we just need a resolution. We need to stop living in fear. Every time it rains, I walk to my front window and I look at what's happening in the street at least once, if not twice an hour. But I can tell you honestly, I live in fear that it's going to flood again. Even if it calls for 2 inches. I know, it's not going to happen, but there is an absolute fear there. And part of that, we need to just move this forward. Give us all peace of mind. Let us move on with our lives and get back to being happy and living. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. Before we move forward, I want to remind everyone that the City Council speaker policy that allows certain representatives of groups to speak for 10 minutes applies only to planning items and items where a public hearing is required by state law. As to all other items on the agenda, each speaker, whether speaking individually or on behalf of a group, will have 3 minutes to speak. Next speaker.
Matt Tonelson. And after Mr. Tonelson will be Barbara Messner.
Good evening. Thanks for the time. My name is Matt Tonelson. I live in Rainier Village. Mr. Leahy stole my thunder. I was going to say exactly everything that he just said. So I was born and raised in this city, and myself and my immediate neighbors, we would never ask for anything or for you guys to do anything or recommend anything that might affect our neighborhood or affect our city or neighboring, neighborhoods around us. So with that being said, we have the two proposals in our mind on the table. Proposal 1, we think that would be awesome, and we think that would be the most fiscally responsible, simply because with the cost sharing, we have been told that any additional funds left over would go towards Phase 2, which would need to happen down the road to help fix Rainier Village, which I'm in. While we know that that is a very small amount that Phase 2 would need, it's still better than zero. Now, with that being said, Proposal 3 also would be great. The fact that there would be less homes and Village D would be used for stormwater runoff and storage, assuming that the city, I guess, would maintain that. That's, we think, a wonderful plan. So like CJ said, we need an answer tonight. We need a decision tonight, whether it be proposal 1 or whether it be proposal 3. This can no longer move forward. This is the 4th time I've been up here in the last 2 years. We're hoping it's the last. We want to save your time. We want to get back to our lives and some normalcy. And so we only had 2 speakers tonight. We don't see the need for any more to parade up here and tell the story again and again and again. It's time to move forward, and let's make a decision on proposal 1 or 3, please. Thanks for your time.
Barbara Messner, and after Ms. Messner is Stephen Berman.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council, and thank you to all the gentlemen who dressed in your suits. I really appreciate you taking the time to dress for a very special occasion. There's no excuses for not being prepared for this meeting. Okay, on the, everyone who wants to hurry up and push this through, the flooding issues are a major problem. So is crime and traffic. If you do a cost share with the developer, a lot of people couldn't be here. I'm sure everyone on council knows that I asked, why you scheduled a meeting today, July 3rd, when no other city in the region has a meeting this entire week. And none of them have meetings at 6 o'clock. So you are restricting access, and there would be a lot more people here. But this project has been around since 2004, and it was sitting in 2012 when I think Ms. Henley brought up that there were some developers who hadn't done anything with their projects. So I just don't see what the rush is in, the residents in Windsor Woods, Princess Anne Plaza, they've needed help too. And, these temporary fixes, that's not a solution. And there's no guarantee that whatever you do will work. So, thank you.
Stephen Berman.
Mayor Jones,
Welcome.
City Council members, and as an Eagle Scout, I salute you, Mr. Moss. Thank you. Well, I was confused tonight. I stopped out there to sign up and found out that there were 2 things that were coming up that I had some interest in. So I think this one probably is more in my area that I want to talk to you about. It's been a long ride. I've been before you many, many times regarding the Ashfield Park development over the past 15 years. And I've seen the changing developers. I've seen the changing modifications. Initially, this was all supposed to be a big borrow pit, and they decided to put a development in here. My family and I live on, for the past 30 years, at 1685 Flanagan's Lane. And I sent each of you a letter on the 9th of June with my concerns that developments concerning Village C, D, and E will incur unacceptably high costs to improve stormwater drainage. The high costs call into question the cost benefit of developing the remaining villages. To improve the stormwater drainage for the Ashfield neighborhood, the city's devised a complicated yet a costly solution that is projected to cost in excess of the different phases of about $35 million. We're talking about right now about 11 or 12 million. Then we add another phase. That's just for Ashfield Park. And you've got residents all over the city of Virginia Beach that are taxpayers that are contributing to Ashfield Park. The city is also waiting for an analysis on the sea level rise and impact study to be completed this fall. And I don't understand why the rush is to approve without the complete study analysis and input from the citywide residents who will have to foot the $35 million bill. The proposal suggests that the developer could end up paying nothing, which we saw in proposal number 3. On a more personal concern, with excessive recent rains, we've experienced where I live overflowing ditches and standing water on our property due to the Asheville development and the drainage systems. I believe the recent initiatives city engineering has taken to draw down retention ponds have created backflowing water into the ditches on Flanagan's Lane and onto my property. We've not had serious stormwater concerns in the past. All of a sudden, it seems to be happening, I guess, with the recent Matthew. Although my property is not required, I've purchased FEMA flood insurance. I'm not an engineer, but I wonder with recent flooding in the area, will I need to take steps in wet-proof flooding? Will I need to modify my crawl space so that the floodwaters will enter but not cause significant damage to my home? Will I need to build a ring wall, such as a floodwater or levee around my home to hold back floodwaters? The 2016 flooding demonstrated that increases in residential density within the transition area should be kept to a minimum. Development exacerbated the flooding, creating unacceptable risk to current residents and reducing absorption capacity and increased runoff in neighboring neighborhoods. I remain skeptical of the proposed solutions. I encourage you to at least look at this a little bit further, perhaps even defer this one more time, and to address the true potential that we're unsure of what's going to happen in terms of the stormwater. Thank you.
Mr. Berman, before you leave, first of all, thank you for recognizing Boy Scouts. For those you don't know, I came right from Boy Scout camp to get here for the meeting tonight.
I suspected as much.
Because I thought it was important. But also, Mr. Berman said on the panel that I was on when I got a presidential internship under Jimmy Carter and down in Norfolk, and I appreciate, turned out great. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for allowing me to talk before you today.
That's all the speakers, sir.
All right, Ms. Henley?
Well, I hope that since we, I believe Al,
I have you signed up to speak for the planning item, Mr. Henley.
were we also going to be hearing the planning item at the same time, since we're not hearing that tonight?
Do we want?
We can.
I think we should.
can hear it.
Go
Just
ahead.
fine.
Okay, I'm sorry, I
Okay,
apologize.
Go ahead, Al.
So the next speaker, Steve Conrad.
Amanda.
So you're going to go ahead and open the public hearing for this planning item,
Yes,
sir?
Please. I'll open a public hearing for planning.
Mr. Conrad. And then after Mr. Conrad will be Barbara Messner again. Do you want to speak twice?
Mr. Mayor, Council. I'm actually a resident in the south end of Virginia Beach, so I represent a organization called Delta Waterfowl. We've been involved in this for about approximately the last 45 days, and I came to the council meeting the last council meeting, and noticed one thing that didn't get a tremendous amount of ear. I'm here not to speak against Asheville Park flooding. I'm not here to speak about the developer. I'm here to speak about water quality. I have spoken to biologists from North Carolina to North Dakota, sent them information, had it reviewed. I've got differing opinions across the boards. But the one thing that I'm sure of, we went to a meeting May 23rd with Melanie Coffey. She's the permitting, MS4 permit person. And she couldn't tell us what was being pumped from the storm drain into the creek, which eventually ends up in the North Bay. And for the geographic situation, you all know that North Bay doesn't empty out to Oregon Inlet. Without testing this water, we may be exacerbating a situation. Melanie it may be kind of redundant, but Melanie sent me an email yesterday, late afternoon, after I'd signed up to speak, telling me that the city has agreed to test in 8 different locations. We haven't been told what those locations are. However, the areas that needed to be addressed, and is water volume. You're currently on your temporary pump 6 million gallons a minute. In a period of 24 hours, you're 8.5 million gallons. The permanent pumps will pump twice that. So there's a turbidity issue. The parts per million of automotive pollutants, we couldn't be told. And these are things that I pulled off EPA sites. These are 5 areas of concern that I think everyone in this room should be aware of. Parts per million of automotive pollutants, parts per million of pesticides, fertilizers, and other home contaminants. They got some great lawns in Asheville Park. You guys have a beautiful neighborhood, and I applaud you for protecting it. Pesticides from fertilizers, other home contaminants, bacteria caused by pet waste, and the final one is potential pollutants from construction sites. Those areas are not being addressed. I've actually spoken with people down in Currituck County. They're spending a lot of money on oyster restoration. We have a wind tide situation that eventually what we put in the water here will be going into the water down there. So again, I'm not here to speak about Asheville Park's flooding. I don't want to see their homes flooded. We as an organization don't want to see their flooding. But we'd like to see this water quality testing and have these items included in that testing. Because if you think down the road, if North Carolina starts experiencing problems, they are going to look north. So I just think that council and Mr. Mayor, they all need to address that issue. I mean, I'm an avid duck hunter. I'm a fisherman. I want to see that bay healthy. It's coming along. I've talked to the biologists down there. They say the SAV situation or subaquatic vegetation is actually doing well. They say the water quality is good. but look at what you're putting in there, please. Thank you.
Ms. Messner? And after Ms. Messner will be Steve Beckman again.
I appreciate the last two speakers. I'm glad that people were able to attend tonight. There was a teacher, Christopher, I can't remember his last name, who had an excellent speech, and he pleaded with y'all. He teaches their children. He pleaded with y'all to wait for the studies. What is the rush? Why can't you wait? And Mr. Moss, this isn't about you and your Boy Scout duties. If you and Mr. Dyer and Ms. Abbott weren't blocking people's pages, we could actually ask you questions and get answers. So it doesn't take 5 minutes to bring a jacket. This isn't the first time you've worn your Boy Scout uniform. I doubt if you do it for the Navy when you go to work. So I don't want to get off topic, but I think all the residents need to be respected, and I don't think everything should revolve around developers. And, adding more homes is not the solution. You already have flooding that hasn't been resolved, and no decision should be made until the flooding has stopped. Thank you.
Steve Beckman, and after Mr. Beckman will be Al Henley.
It was Steve Berman, he's already.
I'm sorry,
spoken.
Berman.
He's already spoken. He's
See, what, you don't want to speak again? Okay. Al Henley. Thanks, Ms. Henley. And then after Mr. Henley will be Leanne Willick.
Apologize for the confusion. Mayor Jones, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, good evening. My name is Al Henley, and I'm a lifelong resident of the City of Virginia Beach. I'm all for proposal number 3 modified, and where the city picks up the right-of-way and the easements, and the city will still receive water quality credits for future highway construction with the development of the BMP. For an example, Nemo Parkway and other highway projects in the southern watershed. Village D goes away, providing Village D is utilized strictly as a BMP and owned by the City of Virginia Beach. This will help the future water storage capacity for Asheville Park, and also treat the water hopefully before it enters into the back bay, which I have very concerns with, as I spoke earlier last week on. The materials, the overburden, the construction for the BNP can also be utilized for the future highways construction, such as Nemo Parkway and other highways in the southern watershed. Also, if it's possible, the engineering, if it's done properly, the BMP, the storage capacity, hopefully, you can downsize the permanent pump that is to be built at the final stages of this project. That the permanent pump, excuse me, will have a capacity with 2 pumps to pump 24 million gallons in 24 hours. That is a large volume of water that will be pumped into the Asheville Bridge Creek that will eventually be delivered into the Back Bay watershed and its tributaries, which is very concerning. More on the flooding. For generations, the lifelong residents of the Pungo and the Crees and the Blackwater area have suffered through generations of tidal flooding. It's not much we can do about wind tide. However, there are some proposals on the horizon. Well, I would like to see a CIP projects in the future when you get some extra money to raise these roads. Currently, last year was the worst flooding I've seen in 64 years, since 1954. These roads, I won't call the names of them, you know the names of them, but they are flooded where first responders are unable to get to these residents. Water is over 30 inches deep in these roadways. The residents are cut off from hospitals and other emergencies. And so if you can find the extra money in the CIP projects, please look into raising these highways. Colchester Road, Muddy Creek Road, Indian River Road, Punga Ferry Road, and the list goes on. It's extremely important to these lifelong residents if some money can be spent in the county for a change. Thank you very much this evening for allowing me to speak, and you have a good evening. Any questions? Thank you very much. Happy 4th of July.
Leanne Willick. And after Ms. Willick will be Chris Lindsay.
Well, here we are again with this continuing discussion to try to correct something we all know was poorly designed, inadequately reviewed, and inappropriately passed through multiple levels of government before being executed. I'd like to speak to some of the points and issues that were raised at the last meeting and on social media since. So I'm not sure that a lot of you guys are aware of some of the social media that is going on out there, but there's a lot of misinformation being spread. Recently, there was an online discussion, in fact, just yesterday, about Category 4 hurricanes and storm surge. The homes here are not built to withstand anything stronger than a Category 1 or a weak Category 2. So storm surge at a Category 4 is going to be the last thing you have to worry about. I believe it was Mr. Al Henley who, at the last meeting, said he wished the city would place a pump on his property. I certainly doubt that he would want to hear or see that pump every day. His statements only cause bad feelings instead of trying to bring the community together and put an end to this. You have 3 different proposals on the table to be able to fix this. More delays are not going to change that. You can have your sea level rise studies that come out, and there'll be another study, and another study, and another study. And you can keep delaying and delaying and delaying. But it's not going to do any good. There was another resident who stood up here and said, that area's always been low. Well, not all of us have the benefit of 50 years of hindsight. There are a lot of people in our neighborhood who've lived here all their lives. And there are also a lot of people in our neighborhood who are military who come here. And I can tell you for sure that when people move into a new area, the things they look for are good schools, shopping, and quality of life. Asheville Park has all of that, but we have something else that we didn't ask for and we didn't cause, and HomeFed didn't cause. This is on your shoulders. I understand that none of you were on city council at the time that Asheville Park was initially approved. That's my understanding. But just like if I go to purchase a business, not only do I purchase the goodwill of the business, I get the bad will as well. And that's what you've got here. So enough with the delays. Let's finish this. You have the means and you have the method. That's all I have.
Chris Lindsay. And after Mr. Lindsay will be Eddie Burdon.
Hi, I'm Chris Lindsay. I'm a resident of Harris Park, so thanks for letting me speak tonight. Again, we've been at this, I think, now for 4.5 years, talking about the exact same thing over and over again. And I know that with the 2016 flooding, most of the attention has gone to Asheville Park, as it should have. But we all have our own issues just with flooding and with drainage. The water in Asheville Park, if you take a look at it and how the drainage works, the water in Heritage Park flows out the Asheville Park. In fact, it flows in a ditch right behind my house, flows across Village C, down Flanagan's Lane, down Sandbridge Road, and it flows out. Every time there's a hurricane, that hurricane is in my backyard. So for us to come here and ask you not just take 18 additional lots in Village C, that's not unreasonable. There's a reason that we're asking you not to do it, because when the water is 3 feet from your back porch, there's a problem. 18 additional houses is more water that gets in our backyards, and we don't want that to happen. The transition area guidelines were put in place for a reason. For the transitional area, they were put in place to stop sprawl and to reduce the flooding. They call for lot sizes to be greater than 15,000 square feet. They call for the lots not to be back-to-back, and they call for the lots to oversee open space. If you take a look at the design of Village C, that's not what that is. So whatever you approve, what we don't want you to do, and again, we want you to address the flooding in Village B, but we don't want you to put in place a solution that causes problems for the rest of us. So please consider that. Thank you.
Eddie Burdon.
Mayor Jennings, Vice Mayor Wood, members of council. On behalf of HomeFed, I want to, first of all, thank city staff for all the work they've done, and you all for authorizing the studies that have been completed over the past 3.5 years that have clearly demonstrated and proven that the the design of the existing drainage system in Asheville Park, which is not in a flood zone. It's was inadequate, mistakes were made, but I appreciate the fact that everybody's trying to move forward, as my clients are. I want to thank Mr. Henley for his comments tonight, and I want to most of all thank the residents of Asheville Park for all that they have done and said to try to help keep this process moving forward so that the neighborhood can remain a viable and a beautiful neighborhood that it is. We will request an indefinite deferral on this, or excuse me, a deferral of this application to the first meeting in August, based on what I believe to be council's intent with regard to item 3-A, and we will be back then, be happy to answer any questions. I do know that, the water that's being pumped, it was off the top before the storm. I won't get into all that. You all heard that before, but we can deal with those issues and the Heritage Park gentlemen in August. Thank you.
That's all the speakers, sir.
All right. Now we'll go to Ms. Henley.
Been waiting for it. Well, this has certainly been a while and difficult for everybody, but I think when we have our very best negotiator, Mr. Jones, get busy at the last minute, he came through again, and we appreciate that a lot. Because there are so many different things we needed to look at here. I know that, everybody has their own particular issue, but when we have such a big area and these things all relate to more than one thing, we really have to look at more than one thing. And I think what we have here before us now finally brings all of this together in a much better way, and also leaves us in a position to address some of these things that are going to still be coming along the way. I think what this does is allows us to look at the long term, not just the short term, and that's really important. Yes, we can say that the city will not have $2.7 million from the developer. However, we will have that area that would have been built with over 40 houses, which is in a pretty strategic place for the future, which I think is going to far outperform $2.7 million, particularly when you're looking at over the years and years and years of maintenance that would have to be there to serve those 40-plus houses. So I think we really have to look at all of these factors and what we are now able to address. I really appreciate the issues about water quality because, we not only have to worry about quantity and getting the quantity off, but we also have to worry about what's happening downstream with the quality. And that has certainly been an issue. I think having the additional storage and the ultimate capacity to do some more BMPs in that area would improve the ability to manage that quality, because you're going to be able to have these additional sediment ponds and so forth to offset that runoff. Also, more storage capacity ultimately, not immediately, but ultimately would perhaps cause less pumping to be necessary instead of having to pump it off in such big quantities quickly, that with more storage on site that it could result in less pumping. Because we do have to look at what we're doing to the surrounding areas. I think Flanagan's Lane will be a good benefactor of not having Village D built and this additional area there. I hope that in the design of these units that maybe Heritage Park can have some benefit here. Perhaps there's a way to make those lots adjoining Heritage, the 15,000 square feet that I think the comp plan now calls for. It would be hopeful that something could be done when you get down to really designing Village C. As far as the quality, and we know the impact downstream North Bay, Ships Bay, Back Bay, Currituck Sound, all the way down to the Albemarle. We are working to build a partnership within the Albemarle watershed, and we have taken some great strides, and I hope we're going to see this summer a real push to do an informational campaign to make people more aware of all of these things that we're talking about, so that we can better be able to deal with the Dewberry study and those recommendations that are going to come in the fall. We really want everyone to become experts on water quality, water issues, recurrent flooding, wind tides, all of that, because we all are affected by it if you live in the southern part of the city. Yes, this also allows us to look at some of the surrounding areas that we also have to be very concerned about, the areas of New Bridge Road and Indian River Road that flood terribly also. And Al Henley, who is a Henley and my husband's cousin, talked about the fact that those roads flood a lot and keep people from being able to get out of that area as well. And the flooding, I think, is probably coming partially down from this area that is a part of Village D. It does flow into the Basin 23, which I hope is going to be one of the next modeling areas that we do, because we really have to be concerned about those downstream properties as well. And as far as raising the roads, one of the things that will be done as a part of this, it's a city component of this, and we should have soon, will be the work that will be done on the Sandbridge, New Bridge intersection, which will put in a bigger culvert, allow it to have a wider turn area in there, and raise that intersection some, because I know that intersection floods a lot. So it's a lot of things we're going to be able to look at now that we do have this broader scope that we're going to be dealing with. And I think the advantage is that all of this will be done as soon as possible. I think we see that the time frame of this one is the same as the proposal one. So I think we've got some of the best of all parts of it, and I think we have the ability as we go along to improve on even what we have here. Having this additional property, I think is going to give us a lot of opportunities that maybe we haven't thought of yet, and that they will come. But I hope that everybody who's been involved in all of this will continue working together and help us to make sure that as we become more informed about these changes in the climate, these changes in flooding, that we're going to come to ways that we can better adapt that will be better for all of us. So again, thank you, Mr. Jones and council, and with that, I'll move approval of 3A.
Second. Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Yes, Ms. Wilson.
I just wanted to say that this afternoon, when Mr. Leahy spoke to the council, I asked about some, in the meantime, some smaller fixes that could be made to Rainier Village. And Mr. Leahy, would you mind addressing that?
So once council makes a decision and we're able to firm up our costs on Phase 1 and take a look at our plans and our CIP, there will be some monies left over. And the first thing we would do is start looking at the engineering in Rainier and Wilshire and prioritize the projects, the pipe projects that from what the biggest bang for the buck all the way down. And then we'd start figuring out how we might fund those. Some of them may very well be done by the operations division, depending on what they are. So, and I'd also comment that the gentleman from Heritage who talked about the flooding, I think that's in that, I think it's in that common area between the two streets. One of the streets is Buttermilk, and I think the other one's Champion Circle. And I actually looked at that, did a little research on that, and it looks like when Asheville and Heritage were separated, that little part of open space in Heritage might have gotten short-circuited from the system. And so we're going to look at that and see what we can do as we go through on Phase 1 and what we can do to straighten that out.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
You've done an amazing job.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Ern?
I didn't have any questions for Mr. Leahy, but I just had a quick comment. 2 days ago was the end of my 12th year on council, and there's only been a handful of times where a delay in action, I think, has created a better solution, and this is one of those that falls in that category in my view. We are going to be able to take immediate action to fix these flooding problems, and we're going to be able to reduce the overall density of the entire project. Although we're foregoing $2.7 million in cash, I would say that the value of the land and the value of the solutions that we can actually come up with that land, both short-term and long-term, are going to be far outweigh the $2.7 million that we can take in cash today. And so I'd certainly like to thank the residents for their patience, but help is coming, and I think we've got a great solution. And Mr. Mayor, I would like to thank you as well, because I think that this is one of those we come up with at the end that was a lot greater than what we started in the beginning. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Kane?
Just want to confirm that this is going on the August 7th agenda, and then the timing switch ordinance, if you will, that we're going to put on the agenda to switch the timing in the CIP will also be on that same agenda, so that we make sure that the funding is there? Or will that be delayed a week? I just want to make sure the funding is there and that we're going to move forward.
Your motion on the table and seconded is a vote to move forward with 3A, and then you'll have another action to defer the planning item. And yes, we will bring an ordinance forward on that 7 August to take that unused Eastern Shore Drive money and put it back in to move forward with design and costs associated with making this all work.
Thank you.
Mr. Dyer?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to take a minute to thank everybody, pretty much everybody in this room, for the collaboration that I think is bringing us to a great solution. It was heartening to work with council in thoughtful and deliberate deliberation, and once again, thank you for Mr. Jones. But I think it was as the result of the input from staff and also the input from the people of Asheville Park that we took very, very seriously. So it was a true collaboration of everybody that I think, yes, maybe it took a little bit more time, like Johnny said, but I think we got in the end result a win-win that we're all going to be happy with, that's going to satisfy a lot of people. But also to give assurances to the rest of the public that we are also concurrently working on many other projects throughout the city, with the same type of priority. But once again, I think it was a magnificent collaboration of the council, the staff, and the people that were directly involved that we were able to come up with this, and I thank you all very much.
Mr. Boss?
Thank you. I just want to make sure everybody knows I think if you're watching this on TV, it might be a little bit confusing. We are voting to direct the city manager to sign the cost participation agreement tonight. That's an action that we are taking independent of the land use. So that means we are, just like we said 2 weeks ago, we were going to work things in parallel. We did. So the work process that actually makes the flooding project mitigation start, that we are acting on. I think that is important that people walk away knowing that that's the positive vote that we took. And one of the reasons why we met on the 3rd of July, which I'm sure the people of Asheville Park are glad we did, so that we wouldn't be delaying further and that we would stay on that timeline we made a commitment to do. And I think we've made that commitment, so I'll make sure we are directing the signing of the cost participation agreement. And yes, and the mayor did a great job, and thank you there, Mr. Jones.
Anybody else? Motion's been made, seconded. No more discussion. The vote's open.
By a vote of 9-0, you have approved the cost participation agreement proposal 3 alternative version.
We'll now go to the planning items. Item I-1.
So we've heard all the speakers for this
Heard all the
Asheville
speakers.
Park, yes.
All right, may I have a motion?
I move that we defer this until August 7th to come back with the modifications that would be necessary to fulfill these agreements that we just arrived at.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, vote's open.
Did you capture all that?
Henley, may I have your vote? Can you close it? By a vote of 9-0, you have deferred this item until August the 7th.
All right. Item 2, City of Virginia Beach for a special exemption for alternative compliance, build requirement in Oceanfront Resort District Form-Based Code south of 19th Street and the east of North Bird Neck Road, extending south to 17th Street and east to just beyond Parks Avenue Sports Center Beach District.
Barbara Messner?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's amazing what nearly 300 voters can get done when they join forces, in a short period of time, when the people at Sandbridge have been waiting almost 3 years, the people at Plaza, Windsor Woods, they've been waiting a long time for help. It's amazing how you find money, in an election year to get something done, and Asheville Park's a nice area. But anyway, on the exemption, this is an exemption for the form-based code, which the city created in 2012, and the city constantly gives exemptions. The Sports Center, which is another version of the second field house, arena, etc. This requires a supermajority 9-2 votes. And Mr. Urn, you work for Burlage Management. I think you have a conflict because this is strictly everything, the arena, everything is to fill hotel rooms. So I really don't think you were nice enough to abstain and not be in the room before. And Ms. Wilson, your ties with Dixon Hughes, auditing banks, including Town Bank finances some of these deals, so I'm just asking the people with conflicts, you all know who you are, not to vote on this. Okay, the oceanfront is the wrong location for the Wave Project, Sports Center, Field House, etc. It's an additional $68 million, included part of the $190 million for the new entertainment district. We have $3 billion debt. I mean, there's plenty of little pockets of money you'll find when you want it. The city should not lease land anywhere for $1 a year. That isn't fiscally responsible, let alone for 40 or 60 years. That's why it's transferred to the Economic Development Authority. And you, Mr. Moss, brought up the conflicts with different people that the council appoints to the Economic Development Authority. This is in a flood area. The large retention pond built on the property taken by eminent domain in 2002 should not be used for any private project. The eminent domain laws were amended in 2012 to stop the abuse of eminent domain. The convention center operates with a $15 million yearly budget shortfall. It's not due to be paid until 2028. Virginia Code 56-575-1 PPEA, that's where you can use education money for private projects, and the money should be going to the schools. Thank you.
That's all the speakers, sir.
I'd just like to
All right.
say, I don't have a conflict.
Mr. Hearn?
Well, I'd like that. I don't have a conflict either. And Mr. Stiles, if we could just put a letter to that effect for this meeting in this particular item, I'd appreciate it. And then with that in mind, I'd like to move for approval of item 2, sir.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded for approval. Any discussion? If not, it's open.
By a vote of 9-0, you've approved the application of the City of Virginia Beach for the special exemption for the alternative.
Next item is ordinances raise short-term rentals, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Do we have any speakers?
Yes, sir. Warren McNeil is the first speaker. After Mr. McNeil is Bonnie Willis.
Before the gentleman starts speaking, the city council is working diligently from each week to put together a plan on short-term rentals and to create an ordinance that everybody can agree to, hopefully, on the city council. And it's a work in progress, so it has not been finished. We welcome everybody's comments, but we want you to know that this will be deferred tonight. Denied tonight, this particular ordinance, because we will be bringing back a separate and hopefully more effective ordinance. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Warren McNeil. I live in Cape Henry Shores, and I'm against these weekly rentals. The reason I'm against it is because we do not have the infrastructure to support weekly rentals. The main street in Cape Henry Shores is Kendall. On a lot of occasions, not just beach weather, not just holidays, but sometimes when people are having parties or when there's special events on TV, it's all you can do to drive down the street because the cars are parked bumper to bumper on both sides. And this is dangerous. Not dangerous for me, because I'm driving a 3,000-pound car. It's dangerous when a young child runs out between these parked cars, and fortunately, on 2 occasions, I've been able to stop because I try to drive less than 25 miles an hour. But we can't expect all these people that come in here for a week at a time to really be that concerned about it. Another thing, people that have short-term rentals are going to be buying a lot of takeout. This is going to increase the amount of trash in the neighborhood, and it seems like our trash fees escalate every year. The people that also are here for a short time, when they drop something on the street or in a yard, are not going to be concerned about whether they pick it up or not, because they're not going to be here next week. And all of this trash winds up in the storm drains. Now, when the storm drains get full, what the city does is they take a powerful hose and they blow everything down into the creek. This is going to increase pollution not only in Long Creek, but also in the Lynn Haven River. And we're supposed to be trying to do things to improve the Lynn Haven River, not let people come in that don't care about the area and cause more pollution. So I've been in Cape Henry Shores for 42 years, and I don't feel like that short-term rentals should be forced on my community. I could have bought a home in another community on the water for much less money, but this community had restaurants, marinas, stores, and many other retail businesses there. And I elected not to do that. I wanted to be in a community that was not multi-level like that. So I feel like, having paid taxes in this area for 42 years, I should not have short-term rentals forced upon me. I know all of you have a difficult job in determining how you're going to enforce these short-term rentals and where you're going to enforce them, but you also need to be able to enforce rules so they can't be in areas where they're not allowed. And I feel like my area has always been single family, and it should be one family 52 weeks a year, not 52 families for 1 week each. Thank all of you for allowing me to speak. Have a safe and happy 4th of July.
Bonnie Willis. After Mrs. Willis will be John Nelson.
Welcome.
Well, my name is Bonnie Willis, and I'm a 14-year resident in Lagamar. When we purchased our home, as with most people, it's the largest single purchase you make in a lifetime. Therefore, when you invest as much as we all have, it upsets us to no end to see what is happening in our neighborhood. Many of my neighbors and I are opposed to even the suggestion that you're considering supporting short-term rentals. Our neighborhood is zoned residential, and we want it to stay that way. If zoning ordinances do not provide for short-term rentals and are technically not legal, then please tell me how my neighbor on Vadito Way is being allowed to short-term lease his home and pool house several times a week, every week. He's charging $899 a night, so obviously the more people he can stay in the house, the cheaper it is for the people. 15 months ago, he began renting his pool house. We were very upset at that time when he applied for a variance, and I do not think that that was approved. This past spring, he began renting the entire house. So my question is he registered to rent the entire house, or is he registered to rent the pool house? When I called the Commissioner of Revenue, they told me he was registered for the pool house. So now, he and his family have moved out. He comes by twice a week between rentals, cleans it up, and at 3 o'clock, the new tenants are in. Our street has now become an eyesore, and we're inundated with commercial buses, and I mean Greyhound buses, vans, trucks, minivans, and cars. At times, he is renting to 25 to 50 people all at the same time. It has become a very unsafe cul-de-sac to live on, and the children on our street are not safe to ride their bikes or skateboards in fear of getting run over. How would you like to look out your front door to see 12 to 15 cars parked everywhere? We do not live in a commercial zone, it's a residential zone, and therefore hotels, motels, and bed and breakfasts should not be permitted. This situation has gotten very much out of control, and we as homeowners are absolutely frustrated. We did not buy our family homes in this beautiful, safe, peaceful residential neighborhood to have a mini hotel on our street. We just want to know what's going to be done about it. Thank you very much.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
I really appreciate all of your information to me. I've been sharing it with these folks, but today when the zoning enforcement officer said that ancillary structures are not eligible for short-term rentals, this is the one you need to check on, please. If you would give him the address.
Yes, ma'am.
John Nelson. And after Mr. Nelson, it'll be Barbara Messner.
My name is John Nelson. I have a unique circumstance in that I was born here, have lived here, and intend to stay here until I die. I am very proud to be a resident of Virginia Beach and have all my life. I would like to, I'm 85 years old, so forgive me if I'm somewhat halting, but I would like to say that Mrs. Willis has personally described the condition that we have on our street. We are perhaps the spear, as the Marine Corps says, the spear of the fight here. We're not talking about what might happen, we're talking about what will happen. And we would like to respectfully ask your consideration in whatever you grant for these permits to consider all aspects of it. My deed reads that I am to maintain a peaceful presence in my home, and that is exactly what we have done for the 85 years I've been here. I would like that supported by the council if possible. I would like also to point out the fact that, pardon me, that Airbnb is apparently a very profitable business. I recently read where they are now in a position where they intend to challenge Uber and other companies, they say perhaps even Amazon, to encourage people to invest in high-quality properties so that they might too rent them and pay for them, promising a return on their investment. So I beg your care and your consideration for whatever you do with this, because it could change our entire city and other cities as well. They are an impact player, and I ask you to think only one thing, and that is, what will we become? And I thank you.
Thank you.
Words of wisdom.
Barbara Massner, and after Ms. Massner will be Larry Horvath.
Everything related to tourism takes a lot of our money. The state has, I think it's gone up to $6 billion debt. And most of it's for public-private partnership and advertising. We advertise everywhere for the city, but we don't have the same type of tourists and well-behaved people that we used to have in the 80s and 90s. As far as conflicts, Mr. Uren and Ms. Wilson, who always speak after I leave, Mr. Stiles works for city council and city staff. He can only give his opinion. He does not give legal rulings. The Commonwealth Attorney, Colin Stolley, this is a letterhead to him, February 16th. He was asked about conflicts for 8 members of council, including yours truly, Mr. Jones, Sessoms, who's gone, etc. And Ms. Wilson, I think I saw one of your fundraisers was at one of these event houses. These event houses are horrible. You shouldn't be turning these neighborhoods into short-term rentals for profit. And I think you have conflicts also. Town Center, those developers donate to many of y'all, including Ms. Wilson, Mr. Wood, Mr. Jones. The Westin at Town Center is tourism, and we subsidize them. Okay, the city has failed to enforce all public safety codes. I've lived at the oceanfront. I know what it's like. I've lived there since '80. I've lived different places. I moved because crime is so horrible at the oceanfront. But we have problems with parking, reckless driving, and to move this into the Sandbridge neighborhood, which was supposed to be preserved without hotels, in these mini hotels, is horrible. We have between 59 to 85 officers short since 2015. Most of them are at the oceanfront. I think public safety should come before profit. And I think y'all need to take care of the residents and enforce the code, which they shouldn't have to come here to ask you to enforce the code. Thank you.
Larry Horvath. And after Mr. Horvath is Cindy DeFore.
I'm Larry Horvath. I'm here representing Bay Lake Pine Civic League again. I want to explain one more time for any of you that have any doubts. We really don't want short-term rentals in our neighborhood. We had a meeting back in October of 2017. We had a near unanimous request that we make it clear to the city council that we don't want these from a very heavily attended Civic League meeting. And I want to tell you again why we don't want them. I think the gentlemen that were up here just now painted a very clear picture, and I don't think I could do any better. So I'm just going to quickly mention that residential zonings are for residents. Webster's defines residence as permanently occupying. We've created residential zoning to protect these residential neighborhoods. People buy into these neighborhoods because they want to raise families. They don't want to have a house bought by an investor next door, whereas 3 bedrooms, he's going to get, with some of the ordinance you've thought about, 3 people per bedroom plus 2, 11 people in a house that used to have 5, and he doesn't know anybody there. And at some point, you're going to have more houses turn that way. You don't want your children to going out in the street playing when you've got people you don't know living, and that number of people every weekend, strangers. We buy into our residential neighborhoods because we want to get to know our neighbors. It's comforting, even if you don't like them all and they don't like you. It's a wonderful thing, these intimacies, and they're important. And if you let these things proliferate, it is, like the other gentleman said, it is something big, and it could turn our whole city into something that we really, a city of strangers rather than neighbors. And I'll mention one last thing. The conditional use permits they're an excellent tool. They're short of outright prohibition. These businesses are as disruptive as a daycare center, which requires conditional use permits. Conditional use permits have been enforced in other cities for short-term rentals based on a density. When you have a certain number of buildings that have become short-term rentals and they've changed the character of the neighborhood, they can be rejected and legally enforced. Protect our neighborhoods. Thanks.
Cindy DeFore. And then next will be David Watson.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Cindy Dufour, and I am a resident of Bay Lake Pines. So Larry's one of my neighbors. I'm also a member of the Civic League there. I'm a school teacher, and I'm a single mom. I currently manage an Airbnb, not in Virginia Beach, but in the Allegheny Mountains. I've had wonderful success. It's helped me make my ends meet with my financial needs, to take care of my family. And Airbnb has it's a fabulous company to work with. They do a really good job of screening the clients and the guests. They have an excellent resolution and rating system, so I've had no qualms with them. And why I currently don't plan to use my Virginia Beach residence as a short-term rental, I am a proponent of having that option in the future in case I would need to do that. So I support the opportunity to have a short-term rental in Bay Lake Pines. In October 2017, Bay Lake Pines Civic League did have a general meeting. Mr. Horvath did read his letter requesting that Bay Lake Pines be restricted from short-term rental. His letter was based on one incident. That was all, just one incident that occurred in the neighborhood where there was a short-term rental. I have heard of no other issues in the neighborhood, none at all, having to do with short-term rentals. The Bay Lake Pines neighborhood has over 280 residences. In attendance at the general meeting were less than 40 people. Mr. Horvath hastily called a vote to object to the short-term rental, and it was immediately passed. I maintain that the vote against the short-term rental in Bay Lake Pines was not accurately represented at the general meeting. The Civic League is comprised of about 70% of the 280 residences, and there were only 40 people there, and those 40 people were of the Civic League. So not everybody in the Bay Lake Pines neighborhood was represented at that vote. the vote was based on that one incident, and there was only 40 people. I do not feel that the vote represents the desire of the Bay Lake Pines neighborhood, and I would like the option to operate a short-term rental in Bay Lake Pines. Thank you for the consideration.
David Watson. After Mr. Watson is Donna Uzzle. I messed that up.
Good evening and happy 4th. I'm aware that the City Council has not yet made any decisions regarding specific STR regulations. However, I was surprised at some of the results of the survey that each of you were asked to complete a few weeks ago. One result in particular that I found shocking was the apparent consensus that the option of a 3-person per bedroom occupancy limit was acceptable. I'm hoping that you all reconsider this in light of the fact that health and safety concerns of both residents and guests of the city should be of paramount importance to the council and city staff. I sent you all an email yesterday that cites various Virginia code, state regulator rules, federal department rules, and professional real estate management organization guidelines. All of those sources consider an occupancy limit based on 2 persons per bedroom as, quote, reasonable. In all of my research, I was unable to find even one organization that suggests 3 persons per bedroom as an appropriate guideline for determining occupancy limits. Additionally, in all of my research on STR regulations being implemented across the country, I have not seen any other jurisdiction base an occupancy limit on 3 persons per bedroom. There is nothing unique about Virginia Beach's housing or neighborhoods to warrant such a departure from the virtually universal guideline of 2 persons per bedroom. Additionally, how many adults, or even children for that matter, do you know that sleep in a bedroom with 2 other people? A push to allow 3 persons per bedroom is just a scheme to boost occupancy levels in order to achieve higher rents without considering the safety of the guests and the neighborhoods. Many of the other STR regulations that have been proposed are pretty straightforward and do make sense from a health and safety perspective. As I mentioned the last time I spoke to City Council, the only times I have encountered problems with my STR was when there were too many people in the house or when I rented it for less than a week. If you create regulations that are reasonable from a health and safety perspective, they'll also likely be reasonable for the STR operators and the residents that live near them. Thank you. And I brought a copy of the references in my email. In case you need it.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello, I am Donna Uzel, and I live in Bay Lake Beach with my husband Frank. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and please excuse me for reading my statements. I'm a little nervous. Frank and I are not members of the Civic League, and thus we have not been in the loop concerning the efforts to limit short-term rentals in our neighborhood. I would like the City Council to know that the Bay Lake Pine Civic League does not represent our wishes. Also, I believe it is important to let you know that some of our neighbors believe that limiting short-term rentals would violate the homeowner's bundle of legal rights, and thus are not voicing their wishes. It is my understanding that the main complaint against short-term rentals is that it would bring an increase of traffic and individuals into our neighborhood. I find this complaint amazing because it has been the deliberate actions of our civic leagues that has caused this very condition. Every year, a fundraiser for fireworks is held to raise money for professional fireworks display off our beach. I am sure you can imagine the amount of cars and individuals this brings into our neighborhood. It in itself would be bearable, except it advertises our neighborhood as a great place to go when going to the beach. The result has been that we now have a constant flow of cars and beachgoers coming into our neighborhood. We have suffered trash, constant cars parking and car runs in our front yard. And just in the last month, we have had 2 separate instances of exposure, separate instances of indecent exposure via urination in our front yard in broad daylight. Taking into consideration the location of our neighborhood and thus the price of short-term rental, I believe short-term renters would be less likely to display inappropriate behavior and more considerate of our neighborhood than the current beach-going crowd that we are currently experiencing. Thank you for listening and taking my views into consideration. Any questions? Thank you again.
Forrest Hickman. Forrest Hickman. And after Mr. Hickman will be Katie Zakowski.
Good evening, City Council members, Mr. Mayor. First off, I'd like to commend Councilman Moss for taking the time to support a organization that helps today's youth. My name is Forrest Hickman. Sorry, I'm kind of nervous. Let me start over. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Forrest Hickman. My family and I have been residents of Virginia Beach since 2005, 13 years. I've got 4 years left in the Navy. When I retire, I'm going to stay here and make this my home, to raise my family here. My family and I are for short-term rentals. I'd like to congratulate the City Council for causing this problem with short-term rentals. It means you are successful at making Virginia Beach a financially viable and a preferred destination for vacationing families. That's a great thing. Let's work together to keep it that way. Keep Virginia Beach residents, businesses, and the city itself successful. I'd like to quote Virginia Beach City official tourism site. In Virginia Beach, finding a place to host your stay is more than finding a room or booking a rate. It's about finding that perfect vantage point for your vacation. Do you prefer a bungalow away from the crowds or maybe a hotel close to the action? Does your bright beachfront condo have perfect views of the sunrise each morning, or maybe you prefer camping under the stars? However you choose to spend your stay, you are sure to find a place in Virginia Beach. So I came here to speak specifically on Chesapeake Beach neighborhood, where the overlay in the use districts by right have kind of been left out. Since you guys are moving on now and kind of just deferring this whole thing, I'm kind of going to bounce around just a little bit, so forgive me. But on that being said, don't forget Chesapeake Beach. That neighborhood is also supported by short-term rentals. Quite a few, in fact. Small businesses, everybody in that area has basically been successful because of that. In fact, all of Virginia Beach front neighborhoods historically have been successful operating this way in the past. It's a fact. We haven't had to legislate it before, but we do need to. So let me skip around. We do believe that the City Council should create legislation on the topic of short-term rentals. Legislation that protects the rights of short-term rental operators, homeowners, the city itself, and short-term rental patrons. We can find a reasonable solution to this problem. Many people are depending on these short-term rentals as livelihood, the extra income they make. My family is depending on the income provided. Sandbridge is not the only neighborhood where people are depending on these incomes. To wrap it up, we hear a lot of stories of where it sounds like rock stars come to Virginia Beach and party like crazy. I'll be honest with you, 99.9% of the people we get here are families. Come here to Virginia Beach to enjoy the atmosphere of the beach. There is a 1%. That's just like the ocean front, big hotels, you've got nice ones, and then you've got not so nice ones. On that, I'll wrap it up and say thank you for this time. That's it.
Thank you.
Katie Zakowski.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for listening to me. I would like to make a distinction between renting out your entire house as a short-term rental where it's not supervised, and then renting out a room in your house where you are there and people are supervised and there's absolutely no problem. So I just ask you to please take that into consideration when you make your decision. Big distinction. Thank you.
Thank you for coming down.
That's all the speakers, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we deny these items.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded, to deny the short-term rental items.
By a vote of 9-0, you've denied the short-term rental ordinances.
We'll now go to appointments. Mr. Wood.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we appoint the following individuals to the following boards and commissions. To the Bikeways and Trails Advisory Committee, Barbara Bishop. To the Community Services Board, Todd Walker. To the Green Ribbon Committee, Claudia Cotton. To the Hampton Roads, Norfolk, and Virginia Beach Joint Land Use Study Policy Committee, James Wood. Historic Preservation Commission, Brianna Perez and Victoria McQuay. To the Historical Review Board, Stephen McNaughton. To Minority Business Council, Francina Harrison, Francis Knight Thompson, Colleen Nabhan. To the Social Services Board, Angela Kellum, Jelana McCasland. So moved.
Are there any further nominations? If not, the vote is open.
By a vote of 9-0, you've appointed those as read by the vice mayor.
Thank you. Is there any further business to come before the formal session? If not, I'll adjourn the meeting, and we'll then have the open mic.
There are no speakers for that, sir.
I think we adjourn.
We have a speaker for, I didn't have anybody sign up. Sorry, excuse me. I didn't have anybody.